This is part 4 of the Federalist number 10. I'm just going to read a couple of paragraphs. We will come back and discuss it in a little bit more in depth later on. The first paragraph starts with the latent causes of faction are thus sown in the nature of man, and we see them everywhere, brought into different degrees of activity according to the different circumstances of civil society. A zeal for different opinions concerning religion, concerning government, and many other points, as well of a speculation as of practice, an attachment to different leaders ambitiously contending for preeminence and power, or to persons of other descriptions whose fortunes have been interesting to the human passions, have in turn divided mankind into parties, inflated them with mutual animosity, and rendered them much more disposed to vex and oppress each other than to cooperate for their common good. So strong is this propensity of mankind to fall into mutual animosities that where no substantial occasions present itself, the most frivolous and fanciful distinctions have been sufficient to kindle their unfriendly passions and excite their most violent conflicts. But the most common and durable source of faction has been the various and unequal distribution of property. Those who hold and those who are without property have ever formed distinct interests in society. Those who are creditors and those who are debtors fall under a like discrimination. A landed interest, a manufacturing interest, a mercantile interest, a moneyed interest, with many lesser interests, grow up of necessity in civilized nations and divide them into different classes, actuated by different sentiments. Actuated by different sentiments and views. The regulation of these various and interfering interests forms the principal task of modern legislation and involves the spirit of party and faction in the necessary and ordinary operations of government. So again, we're talking about human nature. Remember, he is saying there are certain things, regardless of where you go, which part of the world you are, there are certain things that human beings are inclined to do or will do just because of our humanity, the negatives as well as the positives. But here, he's trying to be realistic and remind his audience of the negative sides of groups and parties and factions. Interested people that are interested only for what's good for them or their small group, not, as Madison said, for the aggregate good, for the good of the society as a whole, country as a whole. Okay, I'll go to the next paragraph. No man is allowed to be a judge in his own cause, because his interest would certainly bias his judgment, and not improbably corrupt his integrity. With equal, nay, with greater reason, a body of men are unfit to be both judges and parties at the same time. Yet, what are many of the most important acts of legislation but so many judicial determinations? Judicial determinations, not indeed concerning the rights of single persons, but concerning the rights of large bodies of citizens. And what are the different classes of legislators but advocates and parties to the causes which they determine? It is a law proposed concerning private debts. It is a question to which the creditors and parties are on one side and the debtors on the other. Okay, let me reread this line. It is a question to which the creditors are parties on one side and debtors on the other. Justice ought to hold the balance between them. Yet the parties are and must be themselves the judges. And most numerous party, or in other words, the most powerful faction, must be expected to prevail. Shall domestic manufacturers be encouraged? And in what degree? By restriction on foreign manufacturers? Are questions which would be differently decided by the landed and the manufacturing classes, and probably by neither, with a sole regard to justice and public good. The apportionment of taxes on the various descriptions of property is an act which seems to require the most exact impartiality. Yet there is perhaps no legislative act in which greater opportunity and temptation are given to a predominant party to trample on the rules of justice. Every shilling with which they overburden the inferior number is a shilling saved to their own pockets.